I woke up to sunlight slanting through the blinds, the smell of coffee already drifting in from the kitchen, and the weight of his arms slung heavy and warm across my waist like it had always belonged there. For 3 full seconds, I let myself have it, then my stomach dropped because we had rules, 5 of them. And rule number one, the very first thing we'd shaken hands on, right there at his kitchen table. Half laughing because it felt so absurd to need a rule for something like this, was that he would never stay until morning. He'd stayed until morning. My name is Nora Whitfield, and if you'd told me a year ago that I'd be lying in Eli Carver's bed, listening to him hum off-key to a coffee maker 20 feet away, terrified out of my mind, I'd have laughed you out of Ashcombe Bay. Eli wasn't supposed to be a maybe. He was supposed to be permanent, unchanging, the one person in my life who'd never once made my pulse do something complicated. We'd known each other since we were 14. He was my older brother's best friend before he was anything else. He taught me to parallel park. He walked me down the aisle rehearsal for a wedding that never happened, standing in for the father I didn't have, because that's just who Eli was, the guy who showed up. So to understand why I was lying frozen in his sheets doing math on how badly I'd just broken my own rule, you have to go back to the night it actually started. It was late September and the wedding was Priya's, my best friend since nursing school, marrying a man named Deacon who adored her so completely it was almost embarrassing to witness. I'd cried through the vows, and not just because they were beautiful. 2 years earlier, I'd stood in a dress like that and never made it to the altar. My fiancé, Grant, had taken a job offer in Chicago 9 weeks before our wedding and asked me, gently, like it was a reasonable thing to ask, whether I'd consider pausing us instead of moving with him. I hadn't paused anything. I'd given the ring back and cried in Priya's bathtub for a week. So there I was at her wedding, 3 glasses of champagne past sensible. Slow dancing with Eli because Deacon's cousin had cornered me near the bar, and Eli, watching from across the room the way he always seemed to be watching, low-key, unbothered. Present had simply walked over, taken my hand, and said, "You looked like you needed rescuing." "I did," I admitted, letting him pull me into a lazy sway. "You're very good at that. I've had practice." He meant it as a joke about being a paramedic. I felt it land somewhere else entirely. We ended up outside afterward, in the gravel lot behind the reception hall, both of us a little unsteady, both of us quiet in that comfortable way that 14 years of friendship earns you. The night was cold enough that our breath showed. He draped his suit jacket over my shoulders without asking. "Can I tell you something stupid?" he said. "Always. I don't think I've slow danced with anyone since Sadie." Sadie was his ex, 3 years gone, left for Boston 2 months after his father's funeral, when Eli had nothing left in him to fight for anyone, including himself. He didn't talk about her often. When he did, his voice went careful, like he was walking on something that might still give way beneath him. "How'd it feel?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look that recalibrates something in your chest, and said, terrifyingly normal. "I don't know which one of us moved first. I've replayed it enough times that I genuinely can't say." But his hand came up to my jaw, and I went up on my toes, and for about 4 seconds, Eli Carver kissed me like he'd been rehearsing it for years and finally got the part. Then we both stepped back like we'd touched a live wire. "That didn't happen," he said, but he was smiling when he said it, which ruined the whole disclaimer. "Yeah," I said. "Definitely didn't." It happened again 5 weeks later, and that time, neither of us pretended otherwise. Storm Helena hit Ashcombe Bay on a Tuesday in late October, and I worked a 16-hour shift in the ER dealing with everything a nor'easter throws at a coastal town: a down power line burn, 2 car accidents on the flooded coast road, an elderly man who'd fallen trying to secure his own shutters. Eli had been out with the volunteer fire crew half the night, and when he texted asking if I wanted to come sit somewhere that wasn't a hospital hallway, I said yes before I'd even processed the question. We ended up at his place with a bottle of wine neither of us should have opened, watching the storm throw itself against his windows, and somewhere between his second glass and my third, grief just poured out of both of us. I told him things about Grant I'd never said out loud, how it wasn't really about Chicago. It was about realizing I'd built a future around someone who'd pack it up the second something better came along. He told me things about his father's last 6 months that he'd never told anyone, including Sadie, including his own sister. "I don't know how to be soft with people anymore," he admitted, staring into his glass. "I used to be. I think I used it all up." "You're being soft right now," I said. "That's different. That's you." The second kiss wasn't an accident, and it didn't stop at a kiss. I won't walk you through what happened after. Some things are ours, not the internet's. But I'll tell you that when I woke up on his couch at 4 in the morning, the storm had passed and so, apparently, had every boundary I thought existed between us. We sat on his porch the next morning wrapped in the same blanket, watching Ashcombe Bay dry out under a hard blue sky, and had the conversation neither of us wanted to have. I can't lose you as my person, I told him. If this goes wrong, and it will go wrong, everything eventually does, I need my best friend to still exist on the other side of it. So what are we saying? I'm saying maybe we do this. Whatever this is, but we protect the friendship first. We put up guardrails. He was quiet for a second, and then, in classic Eli fashion, he went and got a legal pad from his junk drawer like we were drafting an actual contract. Which, honestly, we kind of were. We wrote 5 rules that morning, half serious, half laughing at ourselves, both of us pretending it wasn't the most vulnerable thing either of us had done in years. Rule 1, we never stay until morning. Waking up tangled together felt like too much, too domestic, too real, too much like something that could break a person if it ended. Rule 2, no labels, no defining it out loud. Rule 3, if either of us started catching real feelings, the kind that don't wash off, we had to say so immediately, no matter how humiliating, so we could stop before someone got hurt. Rule 4, this stayed between us, not out of shame, just ours. Rule 5, if it stopped working, we went back to being just friends. No fallout, no awkwardness. We shook on that one twice. For 6 weeks, it worked exactly the way 2 logical adults imagine an arrangement like that will work, which is to say, it worked right up until it didn't. There were good nights and easy mornings that ended promptly the way we'd promised. There were also nights I caught myself staying an extra hour just to talk, and mornings he'd text me a coffee order before I'd even said I was tired. Priya noticed first because Priya notices everything. You've got a look, she said one shift, handing me a chart. The look of someone who's being very well taken care of. I don't know what you're talking about. Does Eli know what I'm talking about? I threw a pen at her, she didn't drop it. There were cracks in the rules almost immediately, if I'm honest with myself now. The night a guy at Ferris's bar put his hand on my back and Eli materialized at my elbow within 90 seconds, jaw tight, saying nothing. Just being there until the guy wandered off, that wasn't the behavior of a man following a rulebook. Neither was the time I got food poisoning and he showed up with ginger ale and crackers at 11 at night and stayed until I fell asleep on my own couch, though he was gone, technically. Before I woke, a technicality we both knew was getting thinner by the week. And then there was the thing he wasn't telling me. I noticed it in small ways. A phone call he stepped outside to take. A folder on his kitchen counter with a Portland Fire Department logo that he moved to a drawer the second I walked in. A distraction behind his eyes some evenings, like he was doing arithmetic he didn't want to share the answer to. Everything okay? I asked once and he said, yeah, just work stuff, in a tone that closed the door on the subject so firmly I didn't try the handle again. I told myself it wasn't my business to push. We had rules, prying past what he offered wasn't in them, I should have pried. The second nor'easter of the season, the one everyone still calls the bad one, hit Ashcombe Bay in the second week of November, worse than Helena by a wide margin. I pulled a shift that started at 7 a.m. and didn't end until nearly 1 the next morning, hip deep in hypothermia cases and a multi-car pileup on the causeway. By the time I got home, I was running a fever I'd been too stubborn to admit to all day, shaking so hard I could barely get my key in the lock. I don't fully remember calling Eli. Apparently I did, somewhere around 1:30, in a voice Priya later described to me as genuinely alarming, because Priya was the one who told him to go. Since her own hands were full with her newborn nephew and a still raging storm outside. What I do remember is Eli's face in my doorway, soaked from the rain, saying my name twice before I answered him. I remember him pressing the back of his hand to my forehead and going very still. I remember him making me tea I didn't drink and holding my hair back at 2 different points in the night that I sincerely wish I could forget. And I remember, somewhere around 4 in the morning, surfacing out of a fever dream just enough to hear him talking, not to me exactly, more like to himself, the way people do when they think you're too far under to hear them. I was going to take it, he was saying, quiet, rough. The Portland job. Ray's offered it to me 3 weeks ago, lead medic, training officer, the whole thing I said I wanted since I was 22. I told him yes in my head about 4 times. A pause, the sound of him adjusting my blanket. I was going to take it and not tell you why because the real reason isn't that it's a good job. It's that I don't know how to keep doing this with you and call it casual. I've been in love with you since we were 17 and you cried on my shoulder over some guy named Tyler. And I have been so careful for so many years to never let you see that. Because the day you look at me and don't feel it back is the day I lose the only unbreakable thing in my life. His voice cracked on that last part. So yeah, I was going to leave. Rule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I wrote every single one of them so I'd have an exit. And now I'm sitting on your bedroom floor at 4 in the morning, and I already broke the first one 3 hours ago and I don't even care. I didn't say anything. I'm not entirely sure I could have fever thick and half conscious as I was. But I heard every word and something in me that had been braced for years. Since before Grant, maybe since I was old enough to notice people leave, loosened just slightly in my chest. By morning, my fever had broken, the storm outside had blown itself out to a gray drizzle, and I woke up in my own bed with Eli's arm around my waist, his breathing slow and even against my hair. Rule 1 thoroughly, undeniably broken, he was still there. He must have felt me stir, because his arm tightened instead of pulling away, which told me everything before either of us said a single word. You stayed, I said, my voice wrecked from sleep and fever. Yeah, he didn't sound like he was going to apologize for it. I turned to face him, and for a second we just looked at each other in the flat morning light. Two people who'd spent 6 weeks pretending a handshake agreement could contain something that had clearly never been containable. I heard you, I admitted, last night, some of it. Maybe most of it. I watched him go through the full arc of a man realizing there's no walking something back, the flinch, the brief impulse to deflect, and then visibly, a decision to just stop running. Okay, he said, then tell me about Portland. I turned it down this morning. Called Ray's at 6 a.m. before you were even awake. Eli, I don't want a job 3 hours away from you, he said, plain and steady, like it was the simplest fact in the world. I spent 3 weeks convincing myself distance would fix something that was never broken. It just would have made me miserable somewhere new instead of miserable here, except here at least I get to see you. You're allowed to want the job, I said, and I meant it because I understood. Suddenly, exactly what those rules had actually been. Not a way to protect our friendship from romance. A wall he'd built so romance could never fully arrive, because arrival meant risking the one relationship he'd never lost. I know I'm allowed to want it, I want you more. He reached up, brushed my hair back from my damp forehead with a tenderness that had nothing careful left in it. I've been in love with you for 11 years, Nora. I wrote 5 rules trying to survive loving you quietly forever. I'm done surviving it, I'd rather just have it, all of it. Out loud, I felt my eyes go hot, and this time I didn't try to blink it back. I proposed those rules because I was scared you'd leave the second it got real, like Grant did. Like everyone eventually does. I'm not everyone, I know that now. I pressed my palm flat against his chest, right over the steady, ordinary thud of his heartbeat. The same heartbeat I'd been listening to my whole adult life without ever once admitting what it meant to me. I don't want the rules anymore, Eli. Good, he said, because I only ever kept one of them anyway, and it wasn't the first one. Which one did you keep? Rule 4, he said. And kissed me slow, certain, nothing like the panicked 4-second kiss in a gravel parking lot 8 weeks earlier. This stayed between us right up until it didn't need to anymore. What happened between us that morning is not something I'm putting into this story. Some things are still just ours, but I'll tell you that by the time I found the legal pad later that week. Wedged behind his kitchen junk drawer where he'd shoved it in October, we tore it into pieces together, laughing, and fed it into his fireplace like we were cremating something that had genuinely served its purpose and could finally rest. It's been 8 months now. Priya still says I have the look, except now she says it without a raised eyebrow, just a smile. Because everyone in Ashcombe Bay eventually found out anyway, small towns don't keep secrets as well as scared people think they do. Eli's still a medic here, still the guy who shows up, except now he shows up to my door every single morning instead of leaving before sunrise. And there's a toothbrush of his in my bathroom that neither of us has ever once discussed, because it stopped needing discussion around the same time the rules stopped mattering. Sometimes I still think about that morning I woke up with his arm around me, terrified, doing frantic math on a broken rule. I understand now that the math was never the point. Some people spend years building agreements, guardrails, 5 careful rules typed out to keep themselves safe from exactly the thing they wanted most. And sometimes the bravest thing another person can do for you isn't following those rules perfectly. It's breaking the first one on purpose and staying anyway long enough for you to wake up and realize you never wanted him to leave in the first place. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and listening to Eli's and my story. It means more than you know to have you here. If stories like this one find something true in you, I'd love it if you stuck around and subscribed. There's more where this came from. And I have to ask, has anything like this ever happened to you, or maybe to someone close to you? A rule made out of fear, broken by someone who turned out to be worth the risk all along. I genuinely love to hear it. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.